Hello and welcome to China XYZ. I'm Guo Yiming. Today we are taking a closer look at China's dynamic digital economy. Joining us today are Mr. Zhang Gong, a professor of economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Mr. Xu Yongming, founder of Huanyue Technology. He's also the former vice president of iQIYI. Before that, he worked for Baidu and Ericsson. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Derek Holst, he's a PhD student at the Central University of Finance and Economics.
Thanks for having me.
And Li Jiaying, she's a second-year graduate student at Peking University. Thank you all for being here today. So to kick things off, let's dive into something personal yet relatable. Derek, I know that you came to China just last year, and I believe that you must have had some interesting experiences with China's digital economy. Could you share with us some of your interesting encounters?
Yeah, the one that affects my daily life the most is how I use Alipay and Weixin Pay compared to America. As if you're American, majority of us use credit cards still instead of cash. Some still use cash, but not really. And only recently we started using a thing called Apple Pay, which is very similar, where you use your phone and you can scan it at checkout. But again, most Americans are going to use their credit card. Whereas in China, I feel like I've never used cash before, actually. I think I only use my phone, like Alipay and Weixin Pay. And for Americans, that's pretty much you just scan something. So either they're going to buy something and you scan a code and you type in the price, or the cashier types in the price for you, you scan your phone, and it's all done. It's really, really convenient, and I really like it. Online shopping, even though I don't shop as much, in America, when you do online shopping, the majority is going to be Amazon. There's other smaller websites, and maybe a certain product will have its own website, but generally speaking, if you're talking about online shopping, it's going to be Amazon. Whereas in China, you have a little bit more variety, like Taobao and Pinduoduo and JD. And the other thing is it's very different, whereas Amazon has a lot of general goods. I feel like Pinduoduo, especially, that's one I use the most actually. It has a lot of specific goods that are really, really cheap too. Whereas in America, it can sometimes be a little bit expensive, especially with delivery costs. And I can go into later on when it comes to delivery food. It's really expensive. I feel like the Pinduoduo is really cheap and it's really convenient.
And also, Jiaying, I know that you're a Generation Zer and you've literally grown up in tandem with China's digital transformation. So could you share with us some of your memorable moments over the past decades in this kind of transformation and how they've transformed your day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think our generation is really lucky because we experienced the whole transformation process during our growth. And I think my answers are partly similar to Derek's, but I felt how it changed over years. And I just noticed a really interesting thing recently. Now is the beginning of the new term, new semester, and I saw a lot of packages at the delivery points on campus. So now freshmen, they just ordered everything online and bought everything online before they came to campus. Even they are still in their hometown, but they bought things there. I remember when on my first day of my undergraduate, my parents helped me. We held 2 large baggages there and bought everything we need. So now it's quite convenient. That's one thing I noticed recently. And also the mobile payment, I also think it's really, really convenient. I also haven't used cash for years maybe. And actually the elderly people in China, they are more adaptable to online payment than I thought. Like my grandparents, they are 76 years old this year. And now, in the past, before the Spring Festival, they need to go to the bank, withdraw some money and put it into the red envelope to send to me. But now they just transfer money on WeChat. So even now I'm in Beijing, I can get little gifts from them or hongbao from them just online. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's truly incredible how these digital economies have been intertwined into our everyday lives in this short period of time. Almost 10 years ago, we can't imagine having this kind of mobile payment or food delivery or shared bike. But now this has become our everyday lives, part of our everyday lives. So Professor Gong, what do you think are the reasons behind China's rapid expansion in terms of digital transformation?
Okay, so this is a very good question. Derek made some comparisons between United States and China. And if you look at the companies, these digital platform companies in China, they actually all started later than their US counterparts, right? Alibaba started later than Amazon, Baidu, your former employer, started later than Google. But looking back now, I think there's no doubt that the extent of digitalization of this economy is way ahead of the United States. I think Derek agree with that, right? So you may ask, why is that? So, I've been thinking about this question too, and wearing an economist's hat, I can think of a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, the very fast development of China's digital economy has a lot to do with the not so competitive brick and mortar retail industry. Now, in the United States, digital companies are having a pretty tough competition with these very entrenched retail giants like Walmart. I mean, Walmart is a very competitive model. The cost is very low, and American people are very accustomed to that kind of lifestyle. But in China, as you know, you go to a mall, you go to these big, supermarkets. They're actually quite expensive. Okay, and the cost advantage of buying things on the digital platforms, on these e-retailers, are pretty high. So there's a pretty significant price difference there, and that makes a lot of room for growth for the digital companies, e-tail companies. And the second reason I think has a lot to do with the other fast development of infrastructures. It's not just selling things. You have to have a payment system. You have to have a delivery system. You have to have a storage, warehousing capacities. And I think at a very fundamental level, the way American people live and we Chinese people live really offers the Chinese market a cost advantage. We live in clustered dwellings. We live in high-rise buildings, right? Whereas most Americans, I think 60% of American households live in single-family houses. So it's a little bit more expensive to make deliveries, right? And on top of this, there's a labor cost advantage. I mean, we have a million workforce of people making fast deliveries. They don't make a lot of money. Maybe 4,000 or 5,000 yuan a month, something like, maybe even more if they work very hard. But in the United States, to hire somebody to do deliveries is very expensive, right? So, the labor cost has also a lot to do with this. That's the second reason I can think of. The third thing I can think of is it has a lot to do with the consumer taste. I think American people are fairly conservative in trying new things, I think, right? It's a very mature market. People believe in brand names, and it's, really difficult to convince people to try something new. Whereas China is an emerging market, it's very, consumer dynamism. People's tastes change very fast. People are more willing to try new things.
Even Jiaying's grandparents uses mobile payments.
Right. My father is 91 years old and he's using WeChat and he's ordering things online, actually. I'm amazed at this. And also I think a lot has to do with the regulation, I think. I think America has a quite cumbersome, regulations. And companies have a huge legal liability when you get into something, more revolutionary. Whereas here in China, I think the regulatory environment is more relaxed, and it's a more conducive environment for companies to try something new and adopt new models of doing business.
Yeah. So, Mr. Xu, from an insider's vantage point, what do you think are the reasons behind China's flourishing digital economy? And what makes China's digital transformation process so different from other countries?
I think Professor Gong has mentioned much of it. For me, I think the most important part is that the offline economy is not so good. There are a huge gap compared to the West. But the gap between China and the West for the online economy is much smaller, even from the beginning. So that's the reason I think. So that's the main, very key part. As you also mentioned, as we have a very large population and we live in the centralized buildings, And also, this provides a large amount of the talents already. So so many of the talents, they are going to the online economy, digital economy industries, and they get very better paid pay.
There is a growing trend that Chinese people are more opting for live streaming e-commerce, like 直播带货. Like there is an KOL or online influencer promoting products or services online for the customers. So I know that Jiaying, you have conducted researches on live streaming e-commerce and also MCN multi-channel networks. Could you share with us some of your interesting findings on these topics?
Yeah, of course. Like last term, I conducted research with my a Spanish student and also American students. We were really curious about China's digitalization, and we need to go to a city to do the research. So we chose Hangzhou. It's like the most digitalization city in China.
Yeah, the hub of live streaming e-commerce.
We noticed a really interesting phenomenon is the aggregation of the MCN companies. So MCN companies, like agencies, provide services to the influencers, maybe some commerce resources, and also some content assistant, and also they will run their own accounts. And it's a really interesting thing is there are a lot of MCN companies appear in China in recent years. And in 2022, there are over 20,000 MCN companies, and over 60% of them are in Hangzhou. And this phenomenon has never happened in other countries or other cities. So we were really curious about the reason behind that. And after the field trip and interviews with the CEOs of MCN companies, we summarized three reasons behind that. And the first one might be the establishment of Alibaba is very obvious because it's really important for the open up of the e-commerce era of Hangzhou, even China. And the first batch of Taobao model, they became the first group of influencers, online celebrities. Yeah, so that's bring the really beginning of the whole thing. And the second thing is the strong and reliable supply chain and logistics, like Mr. Xu mentioned, like in Zhejiang province and Jiangsu province, the people there are really good at business, and there are a lot of factories, companies, and a lot of companies in the supply chain and also warehouses. So it's really convenient to get the goods and sell them and sell to the whole country. So that's the second reason. And the last one is about the talent support policies in Hangzhou. Hangzhou has really good incentive policies to attract young talents to Hangzhou. And Hangzhou now, I think, is one of the largest influx of young people to there. So the influx of young people also bring the e-commerce talents and live streaming talents there. And so from the case of MCN companies, I think the common success factors of the China's digital industries, maybe the first one is the government support and policy. And the second is the reliable supply chain and logistics. And the last one must be talents.
So how have these platforms redefined the businesses operate and how consumers make their purchasing decisions?
I think for businesses now, they do their marketing online, and as I know, a lot of international brands, if they want to go to China market, they need to understand how the live streaming works. So they will change their marketing channel from just traditional ways to now combine offline and online. And for us customers, I think now we tend to during the process of we decide what to buy, we will watch live streaming. I think for the live streaming selling, now China is really ahead of other countries, and the international students in our school, they really love that, and they also learn Chinese, by the way, to watch the Chinese live streaming selling. And I think the live streaming selling, you can really get the experience. They will show you the products directly and how the products use, and we will also buy things that our favorite influencers recommend. I think people's purchasing style and how we make our decisions are really changed by that. And I think it's really interesting. And I also do. I will also buy things in live streaming. Yeah.
Me too. I also spend a lot of time watching live streaming sessions,
Yeah, I'd like to share some thoughts for the live stream e-commerce. Actually, this part is the biggest increasing part for the online e-commerce in China, actually, but not the same in the West. I think maybe one of the reasons is that because we have different cultures. Yeah, people here like to gather together to see so many people gathering together. People like to follow other choices. So more people choose this, I will choose this. So Chinese people.
Word of mouth.
Yeah.
I may want to do some pushback actually. I think overall, the digital economy is a good thing, but at some point, we need to draw a line. It's a fact that digital economy has some, in my view, from a social perspective, has some impact on people's lives as well. I'll give you a couple of examples. We were just talking about, shopping through live streaming rooms and all these things. Well, it's just very convenient, let's admit that. But at the same time, having a good time with the family on a Sunday afternoon, go to the shopping mall together, have a dinner, let the kids play. I think this kind of a lifestyle is increasingly gone now. Another thing, for example, Meituan we're talking about, we order food, right? This is a direct threat to a good mom-cooked, night dinner, where the families all sit around together and talk, right, and have a good time. And I think increasingly that kind of lifestyle is gone. So I think at some point, we need to draw a line. Digital economy is a good thing, but it's also at the cost of diminishing human interactions between people, between family members, between husband and wife, parents and children. And I think we also need to reflect on these more profound social questions, social impact.
But on a brighter side, that live streaming e-commerce and MCN has really transformed the businesses operate and the people, how people, consumers spend their money. Even people in the remotest areas can now reach a national audience or even a global audience thanks to this kind of platforms.
Yeah, there's a big transformation of the rural communities, just what you're talking about. Previously, for a rural household to sell something, it has to go through a middleman, it has to go through a cumbersome, distribution system, and the cost is very high. Oftentimes, it kills the business opportunity. But now with China's sort of e-commerce infrastructure built down to the villages, right? So all of a sudden, you're living in a remote village. It's actually not just in China. I mean, we're talking about even people living in Rwanda, for example, right? Rwanda coffee is selling very well here in China. Previously, we've never heard about Rwanda coffee, right? So now you have a farmer somewhere in Rwanda can sell directly to Chinese consumers, coffee. So I think there's no doubt about this. The e-commerce revolution has brought about tremendous opportunities of economic development for the rural communities, for the very less developed areas, and not just in China, in other developing countries as well. Alibaba is building this kind of infrastructure in many developing countries. I mean, they're doing this in Africa, they're doing this in Southeast Asia, in South America. So I think the digital economic development in China, it does have a global impact, especially on the developing world. So that's a very good thing, I think.
Yeah. So what do you think are the factors that has enabled China's live streaming to flourish?
I think this has a lot to do with the government. I mean, we're talking about a remote village, let's say in Fujian province, a mountainous area selling tea, very good tea, right? If for that to happen, you have to have very good roads down to each village, right? You have to have a fast delivery system down to each village. So the government helps, pays some of the cost of building these roads. These are public goods, public infrastructures, without which e-commerce cannot flourish. And this is purely provided by the local governments, actually, right? So I think, we talk about the e-commerce development in China, but the Chinese government, local governments, township governments played a huge role, in my view, as an enabler, as an infrastructure provider. These other things can only be provided by the government. No private company is going to step in to build roads. I mean, this is the challenge in a lot of developing countries. The World Bank spend a lot of money, for a lot of developing countries trying to make loans for building these infrastructures. It's not an easy task, actually. Very expensive, right? Not so much a return in the short run. In China, we did this very fast in the last 20, 30 years. Now we have a fairly good, decent infrastructure in terms of telecommunications, road conditions, electricity, networks.
Chinese companies like ByteDance and also Shein are also making inroads in developed countries like the US and the Western world. So what do you think are the reasons behind their international success?
Do you know that I heard that like TikTok, Temu, I'm on the top downloading list already.
Oh, I mean, TikTok's been like the top, number one on American markets for like almost a year now, probably. I was curious, like this is a related question. Do you guys ever heard of an app called Vine? It's from like my middle school, so around like 2012, 2015. So it's not like, it was an American app. It was TikTok before TikTok, where it was the exact same concept of short form video content. And it's kind of interesting because like people like today were wondering like, why did Vine fail, but TikTok succeeds so well? Because they're almost the same thing. It's just short form content. But the biggest reason why was the monetization model of Vine was really bad compared to TikTok. Because of course, if you can't pay your creators, they have no incentive to keep creating content if there's no reason to make money off of it. Other big reason why is, from what I read and from what I can tell, the TikTok algorithm is like really, really good, psychologically speaking, on keeping you on that app for as long as possible and really good at figuring out what your interests were. Compared to Vine was not as good relative to that. So it's kind of interesting that, yeah, I've heard of those apps, but like the Chinese versions are really successful.
What's your opinion, Professor Gong? How do you interpret Shein and TikTok's success overseas?
Well, I think this probably has a lot to do with the algorithm, and as Derek has been saying, it makes the customer base very sticky. I think, right, attached to the app, and I think probably that mostly explains it. I also want to add one thing about issue related to innovation. In e-commerce age. Economists, also I have this hypothesis that the more an economy is digitized, the more innovation is likely to happen. This has a lot to do with competition, in my view. And I'll give you one example. In old days, in a brick-and-mortar world, you go into a store, on the shelf, you're looking for something, you probably have 6 or 7 brands, right? You're really trying to pick up one from the 6 or 7 brands. But today, when you're typing a keyword on Tmall's website, you have probably, 100 pages, right? And people usually go through the first and second page. The rest of the 19 pages were just totally ignored. And I think this phenomenon imposes huge pressure on companies to keep innovating. In other words, if you don't innovate, if you don't try to come up with a product that attracts people's attention, you're going to be one of the 90-some pages where people are never going to visit you, and you're going to die. So now all of a sudden, every company is trying to innovate, and also the cycle of innovation is, the product cycle is already shortened as well, right? So so it's a very dynamic environment now. It's also an intensely competitive environment, and the only solution to survive in this environment is just innovation.
Keep innovating.
Keep innovating, exactly. So this is actually I probably said a lot of negative things about the digital economy, but on this innovation issue, I think it's a very positive development.
Yeah. So as we wrap up for today's conversation, I'd like to ask each of you one last question. What would you forecast the next big thing in China's digital scene? Would you like to start? Jiaying.
It's really hard to predict. I need to say, as for live streaming, I think in the future, like with the AR, VR technology, maybe when we watch the live streaming, we will try on the clothes by ourselves, like while the live streamer is introducing. I think that's something I can imagine in like live streaming the model. And as our young people, I think we need to consider about our like development path or our career or our life goal in light with the times. Like always keep learning and open-minded. That's my little prediction and my like hope to the future.
Derek?
I mean, it's kind of hard, but my guess was kind of related to live streaming, but more taking an angle from AI, or like artificial intelligence, where for example, the US and Australia, they'll do a thing where they look at the technological advancements of each country and look at like who's at top at certain industries. I think like China was at top, I think of like 33 out of 44. A lot of those related to AI. So like one thing that's even happening in the West is live streamers are now AI. So instead of watching a human, you watch a robot who like, but no, it doesn't look like a robot. It's like a, how do I say it, like a digital human that acts and looks like a robot, but of course it's AI. So potentially companies could use that. Let's say a video game company, they could have the AI play the game and it acts like a human and totally looks like a human. And again, instead of paying, let's say, a live streamer to play a video game, you can just create your own AI. Now it's free. They play the video game, and it's like its own form of marketing like that.
Mr. Xu?
Yeah, if only one thing, I definitely agree with him. AI, it's just for certain. Let me make an example. Regarding the so-called intelligent speakers, in China, the biggest issue should be by Xiaodu, Baidu product. When I was in that company, that we are thinking of that the next search entrance is to replace the mobile phone, the computer. You can search directly to talk to the speaker, what I want, to get knowledge, to ask for him for advice for what kind of food I should choose, etc., all that kind of things. But in the past, without the real AI, actually, it's only voice recognition and speech synthesis. That's it. It cannot understand what we are talking about. But now, with the introduction of the large language model, so this real AI is becoming true. So there are more things. There are things like the people, even they can cheat people if you give them the wrong data. But the trend, I think, is getting more and more clear that the real AI is becoming true.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about digitization towards the consumer end. We haven't really talked too much about digitization at the business end. I think there will be a lot of things happening at the manufacturing side. Overall, China is a huge manufacturing sector. More than 50% of China's GDP is manufacturing. So I think, with this revolution actually, at the retail side, how these companies design products, how these companies do their production, do their warehousing, do their distribution, will fundamentally be changed, in my view, as a result of this. So I think the digital technology, of course, including AI and other things, will be increasingly incorporated into the manufacturing process. And I think this is going to make companies more efficient and more competitive as well.
Yeah, what a great glimpse into the future. So from digitization of the manufacturing sector to the AI-driven assistant and also to AR and VR-driven live streaming experiences, there is really a lot to look forward to in the future. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey through China's vibrant digital landscape. We've delved into its profound influence on our day-to-day lives and also discussed various possibilities that the future holds. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.